You have been told to manage stress, sleep better, eat cleaner, and maybe you have, but visceral fat does not wait for you to feel overwhelmed before it acts. It runs its own supply line, independent of your mood, your mindset, your morning routine. If you have done everything right and that layer around your midsection still has not moved, you were not failing the advice. The advice was pointing at the wrong place. 3 mechanisms in this video, and for each one, exactly what shuts it down, not at the end, right now, one at a time. By the end, you will understand why almost every standard recommendation puts the solution one step too late in the chain. After 45, visceral fat stops behaving like stored energy and starts running its own biology. If you are wondering why the standard approach stress management, better sleep, cleaner food helps with almost everything except that specific layer around your midsection, this is the reason. It does not wait passively. It has 3 active systems that resist exactly the interventions most people try first. We are going through all 3. The damage first, then exactly what interrupts it, because the fix only makes sense once you see the mechanism it is targeting. You have probably lowered your stress, maybe changed your sleep schedule, reduced your caffeine, built in time to decompress, and your body responded. Cortisol in your blood dropped. But the belly fat held its position. Here is why. Visceral adipose tissue, the fat that wraps directly around your organs, carries an enzyme called 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1, 11-beta-HSD1. It takes an inactive form of cortisol called cortisone and converts it into fully active cortisol, locally, inside the fat cells themselves, not in your adrenal glands, not circulating in your bloodstream. Right there, in the tissue. A 2012 study published in the European Journal of Endocrinology found that 11-beta-HSD1 is significantly overexpressed in visceral adipose tissue, and that this local cortisol production occurs independently of what systemic cortisol levels show. Your blood reads normal. The fat tissue runs its own stress response regardless. Active cortisol inside visceral fat cells delivers one consistent instruction: hold on, store. The vault seals from the inside. Managing stress targets the signal at its origin, your nervous system. This is real and worth doing, but it does not reach the relay station that visceral fat has built for itself. The factory keeps running because it was never dependent on the signal you turned down. What quiets it? 2 things, used together. First, a consistent overnight eating window of 12 to 14 hours. When insulin stays low long enough, the chronic inflammatory environment that upregulates 11-beta-HSD1 begins to settle. The enzyme loses part of its driving signal. Second, sulforaphane, the compound in broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables, activates a cellular repair pathway called NRF2 that modulates glucocorticoid activity inside adipose tissue. It does not eliminate the enzyme. It reduces the conditions that keep it overactive. The standard advice targets cortisol in your blood. This targets the source. Assume the first mechanism is addressed. 11-beta-HSD1 has quieted. Cortisol production inside the fat has slowed. Now the next question. Why is the fat still not releasing? Visceral fat secretes a protein called interleukin 6. Most people hear about it in the context of immune response. But in visceral adipose tissue, interleukin 6 does something specific. It suppresses the PKA pathway, the cellular trigger that initiates lipolysis, the process by which fat cells open and release stored fat into circulation. A 2024 study published in International Immunology found that interleukin 6 promotes visceral fat accumulation during aging by directly inhibiting fat lipolysis. When researchers removed interleukin 6 in aged mice, PKA-mediated lipolysis was restored and visceral fat accumulation reversed. The fat cells had everything they needed to burn. They were simply blocked from starting. Think of a release valve on a storage tank that has been wired shut from the outside. You can lower pressure from every other direction. You can create a caloric deficit. But if the valve signal itself is being suppressed by the tissue surrounding it, the fuel stays locked. EPA and DHA, the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish, work through a specific anti-inflammatory pathway. They downregulate NF-kappa B, the transcription factor that drives interleukin-6 production inside visceral fat tissue. A 12-week randomized controlled trial found that 2 grams per day of long-chain omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids significantly reduced interleukin-6 in participants with metabolic syndrome. The placebo group showed no change. Less interleukin-6, less suppression. The valve opens. After 45, the inflammatory output of visceral fat increases year by year. This valve does not close once it gets progressively harder to open. The window for this intervention is real, and it narrows. There is a third loop, and this one has a structural advantage that visceral fat exploits completely. Every other fat depot in the body releases its byproducts into general circulation first. Visceral fat does not. It drains through the portal vein directly into the liver, at full, undiluted concentration, before any other organ receives it. The liver takes that entire inflammatory load before anything else in the body does. Under sustained exposure, the liver develops its own insulin resistance, and in that state, it sends one signal back: store more. The loop closes. More visceral fat accumulates. More load reaches the liver. Hepatic insulin resistance deepens, round after round, without external input. A 2010 study published in Diabetes provided one of the cleanest demonstrations of this mechanism. Researchers transplanted fat into 2 groups of mice. One group received fat with portal venous drainage, the other received the identical fat with systemic venous drainage. Only the portal group developed impaired glucose tolerance and hepatic insulin resistance. Same fat. Different drainage route, completely different metabolic outcome. Choline, found in its highest dietary concentration in whole eggs, yolk included, is essential for VLDL export from the liver. Without adequate choline, the liver holds onto fat rather than shipping it out, which deepens hepatic insulin resistance and keeps the portal feedback running. A 2020 study in Nutrients found that egg-sourced choline significantly reduced interleukin-6 in participants with metabolic syndrome compared to a choline supplement alone, pointing to the whole food matrix as the relevant delivery mechanism, not just the isolated nutrient. The liver's inflammatory load dropped. The feedback weakened. Before we continue, everything here is based on peer-reviewed research and is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. If you are managing liver disease, type 2 diabetes, or any metabolic condition, work with your doctor before making changes. That is the answer to the question we opened with. The standard advice was not wrong, it was downstream. It was targeting blood cortisol, systemic inflammation, the signals that have already been rerouted. Visceral fat was generating cortisol locally, locking its own cells internally, and running a feedback loop through your liver that called for more storage. The advice landed one step too late. I call this the endocrine source sequence, not 3 isolated foods or habits, but a sequence where each step clears a block that allows the next step to work. What most people do wrong is start with the specific foods. The endocrine source sequence starts with when, because the eating window is the only step that quiets all 3 mechanisms simultaneously before anything else can reach them. Weeks 1 and 2. Establish a consistent 12 to 14-hour overnight eating window. No supplementation needed, no new foods yet. This lowers baseline insulin, reduces the inflammatory environment, driving 11-beta-HSD1, and begins to settle the conditions that fuel all 3 loops. This step is the foundation without it. The subsequent steps work at reduced capacity. Week 2 onward. Add fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week. Wild-caught salmon, mackerel, sardines, specifically for the EPA and DHA content that downregulates interleukin-6 production at the tissue level. This is the direct intervention for the Adipokine Lock. The eating window creates the conditions. The omega-3 addresses the specific suppression mechanism. Week 3 onward. Add whole eggs daily, 2 to 3, yolk included. The choline supports hepatic VLDL export, reducing the fat load accumulating in the liver that sustains the portal feedback loop. At this point, all 3 mechanisms are addressed in the order that allows each one to compound the previous. What to track? Not the scale. Waist circumference measured first thing in the morning, before food or liquid. This is the number that reflects visceral fat specifically, not total body weight. By weeks 3 and 4, the interleukin-6 shift begins. By weeks 6 through 8, visceral fat tissue becomes measurably more responsive to the eating window. Anyone with existing liver disease or diabetes should confirm this sequence with their doctor before starting. Remember what we said at the start. You are not failing the advice. The advice was pointing at the wrong place. Now you know where the right place is. Not your stress response, not your blood cortisol. The tissue itself. The 3 biological loops running inside visceral fat, independent of everything happening at the systemic level. The source, not the signal. And here is what this actually means for your biological age. Visceral fat is not inert between meals. It secretes continuously the same inflammatory proteins that accelerate telomere shortening, impair mitochondrial repair, and drive the cellular aging markers that a standard metabolic panel was not designed to catch. Every year those 3 loops run unchallenged, they age the tissue around them faster than the calendar does. The endocrine source sequence is not a weight loss protocol in the conventional sense. It is a direct intervention on the mechanisms that accelerate biological aging from the inside out. If you want to go deeper on how visceral fat specifically accelerates biological age and what blood marker predicts it better than almost any test your doctor currently orders, subscribe, because that is exactly what we cover next. It connects directly to everything we just looked at. That video is up here. See you there.